and we'll have to run this by you. We have an interaction. Could you answer hard with the leader or the convener of the Solidarity Vigil on the Black Lives Matter? And we do know that this has taken the whole world by storm. First, it was the United States of America following the death of the Black American in the hands of white police officers of George Floyd, and subsequently it swept through Europe, and now in Ghana we do know that not only has it taken over social media, but there was an event subsequently, and he was picked up by the police and then given bail. And Kojo Yankson had that interaction. We'll bring that to you. But look, let's talk about what also has always been one of our focus areas. Even before the COVID-19, we're talking about our Arrive Alive campaign, and it's talking about safety on the road, and what a way for us to start, because we do know that the numbers had not been too good before the lockdown period, and subsequently, even though we've had the slow movement of vehicles on our roads, is still not the best of times, and we have to have a forward look to the rest of the half year that we have for 2020. And we're going to have a great conversation with the head of communications, the National Road Safety Authority, and then Kwame Kodiotia Hene will also be joined by Superintendent Alex Obeng, who is head education research and training. Well, so let's have on stream Superintendent Alex Obeng, who is with the Department for Education, or Director for Education, Research and Training, the Police MTTD. He's on phone. Good morning to you, sir.
Roland.
Yeah, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, great. I'm good. I hope you had a great weekend. But straight away, let's just get into the mainstream of the conversation. How would you describe the road safety situation for at least the first 5 months of 2020?
All right. Thank you very much. And good morning to viewers and then colleagues who are on the other side. I think generally I would say that we haven't done much as a country when it comes to road safety in terms of ameliorating or reducing crashes and associated deaths, injury and damage, given that just after 12 March, the social distance and the lockdown impact would have restricted many from using the road, and therefore would have expected lesser crashes, deaths and injuries. However, it looks as if that is not the case. That we also, from January, Dumpase, and then later the following month, the Kintampo Babatukuma crashes that claim multiples of deaths. We were expecting that should have slowed down. However, this COVID, though we have fewer as compared to the beginning of the year, fewer interaction on the road, but that theory has been confirmed that where the roads are free, straight and flat, you need to see crashes, and the crashes also contribute to the surge, and that is what we are seeing. Though in the lockdown and this social distance period, we have some of the road users still at home, particularly schools are not in session, among others, and therefore on normal rush hour periods in big cities in Ghana, the congestion is minimal. However, because roads are free, the discipline is still surging, and we have seen a surge in weekly crashes. For example, the past 3 weeks, we have seen the sparks from 21 per week to 47, 40, hovering around 50 per week. And therefore, you see that the data shows clearly that the trajectory that we started with the beginning of the year is what we are still experiencing in terms of deaths, injuries, and damage. So, and the onslaught is led by, when it comes to death, by motorcycle related victims, and that is also worrying in times like this when, for example, we see that there is a complete change and there is new normal when it comes to movement. However, associated behavior and impact on crashes, deaths, injury, and damage hasn't changed much, and that is what I can say.
Why have we seen the phenomenon in which, from March, let's say just after the first week of March, we had the lockdown? The expectation is that for those who are doing the monitoring, you will see less occurrence of incidents, and indeed there were less movement of people, but then we had crashes that occasion for some of the losses. Why do we have such a phenomenon?
Yeah, first of all, when you look at it, we had a little gain when we had a lockdown from, let's say, 1st April to 21st. But then you will see that even within the lockdown, the first week, yes, it reduced weekly fatalities from 50, 52 to 20, 21. Immediately we got adjusted to the situation as road users. We didn't see the data that began to rise. And since then, we are gravitating towards where we were before COVID. And so I think that it's still stand that our behavior, when we look at data, when it comes to use of the vehicle, particularly regarding maintenance, moving violations in terms of speeding behavior, and the kind of other indiscipline that are inhibiting the system, i.e., driver related indiscipline or violations, and has to do with road user, other pedestrian related indiscipline. And when you talk about, in this day and age, motorcycle, you see, Roland, motorcycle, it may be one there, and sometimes I like the way Mr. Tuahin talks about one here, one there, comes together and it becomes many. And motorcycles, if you look at the data, though commercial vehicles and private vehicles, they contribute to a crash and death. Let's say 100, the two combined may contribute to, let's say, about 40, 60. And in terms of vehicle, you realize that the commercial and the private may be many, but the fewer the motorcycle that will crash may kill 60. And that is what we are seeing. Therefore, there's a shift in the discourse. It should at this time be very critical for us when we also focus more of our energy as we discuss the use of on-stage use of motorcycle, and the fact that if as a country we think that motorcycle is going to assist us, the data shows clearly that it is so dangerous a mode, and few crashes that are associated with motorcycle are killing many. If you look at 100 deaths, for example, and therefore motorcycle hasn't helped us at all in this period of COVID. It has killed more than private and commercial vehicle combined within the data, weekly, daily, monthly, among others. And so, as we discussed, we should also be focusing on motorcycles. They become easy mode. It's everywhere, and it's killing by day and by hour. One day, 2 here, 1 day, 1 year, and that is, when you add up, it is more dangerous and it's worrying. And I think that in all these, we should also be focusing seriously, because there is a novel what you call crash machine on the block, which is motorcycle, and it is happening across the country, and it doesn't matter whether it is urbanized jurisdiction or a rural setting. It is everywhere, and it is endangering lives. And I think that is with what I have on my desk. That is what I see.
Yeah. All right. So it's where we also have to bring you to the studio. We do have Kwame Echiahene. He is head of regulations, inspection, and also compliance at the National Road Safety Authority. He's a lawyer by training and practice, and so has a lot to say about regulations and how compliance have been over the period. And thank you for joining me, Kwame.
Thanks for having me, Ronan.
But in relation, or as a complement to what Superintendent Alex Obeng has indicated, it will mean that while we're not having indeed regular crashes of commercial vehicles or the private ones that we have, the localized incidents of the use of motorcycles become integral to this. We do know what the regulation says, that it's not supposed to be used in the manner in which it's being used. What's the authority's own position on the subject?
Well, thank you, and good morning to your viewers. I think that the position is very clear. If you look at the law, in spite of current discussions as to whether the use of bicycles should be allowed for commercial purposes or not, the law is clear on the matter, that it should not be allowed for commercial purposes. And more so worrying is a situation that during the COVID lockdown restrictions, I think that at some point in time there were directives that given the difficulty in observing social distancing as far as the use of motorcycles are concerned, they were not expected as much in the traffic environment. And some assemblies had gone a step further to ban their use within
the jurisdiction.
Within their jurisdiction and within the period, which restrictions are yet to be relaxed in some of those areas. So that's where we are. I mean, it goes down to emphasize the sheer level of a discipline that we've had to contend with, especially with users of motorcycle. Even though the data does not show clearly that these cyclists or motorcyclists, for want of a better word, are doing so for commercial purposes. I mean, the evidence we pick up from the streets in areas where these services are predominant show that that is the case. So when you get into the data, in as much as you have capture for commercial vehicles, because it's an illegal undertaking, the data does not capture Okada, as it were. However, I mean, it is also obvious from our own observation that part of the problems we have in that space is because of that situation. What we have done is to work with the Ministry of Transport. I think for most part of last year, before the COVID restrictions, a team was asked to go around the country to take views on the matter. Even though we acknowledge these constraints and the current law, the reality also is that in some parts of the country, there are genuine transportation constraints, which is to say that without the use of motorcycles somehow for commercial purposes, transportation needs will be close to zero. So views have been taken, and the ministry, which is the supervisory ministry as far as these matters are concerned, have some options to look at, and I'm trusting that in the coming days or weeks, the ministry will take a definite position.
What's the position? Because you picked up opinions, and per the position based on the opinion that the authority has picked, it looks like the citizenry would need it, but we have the law as well.
Yeah, so at present the law hasn't changed. The ministry would have to take a position as to whether it wants to vary the law or keep it as it is and rather strengthen the enforcement modalities. I'm told that the police, for instance, is looking at creating a unit that will assist to deal with these motorcycle incidents within the MTTD establishment. That will be welcoming, because whether they are allowed into the space or not, it is a transportation mode. We must find a way to enforce infractions that may come from these users. Otherwise, I could say that the options are fairly about 3 or so, but the ministry will have to take a decision on either of them. The first option is to keep the status quo and allow for a complete ban. I mean, the law says you can use motorcycles for what do you call it, for deliveries and for private use, but for fare and reward, no, you can't use them for carriage of passengers. That's the current law at present. The other option is to say that let us look at the practice in other jurisdictions where motorcycles, the use of motorcycles for commercial purposes are regulated to get these operators into some form of cooperative and find a way to exercise some control.
And the best practices are in which of the jurisdictions in the sub-region?
I think in Rwanda, about 2 years ago, a team went to Rwanda to look at the way they use these motor bicycles in that jurisdiction. But again, it's sounding a word of caution. Is the fact that it works perfectly in Rwanda offers no assurances that it will work in Ghana, because the level of discipline in Rwanda, I want to imagine, is not as same as our attitude in this country. So we must be cautious in trying to import holistically what seems to have worked elsewhere. The other option is to look at how to marry the two situations, because as I said, there are places or jurisdictions in this country where if you cut out motorcycles, you're saying that there should be no movement. So the ministry will look at these options and have advice on the way forward.
Superintendent Alex Obeng, what do you say? I know what the position of the law is, being reiterated. And once you go around, you go and pick opinion, it also means that the police should have a position. What's the likely future position of the police MTTD?
All right, thank you very much. I think the position of traffic police everywhere in the world is always the position of the state. That the state policy that is formulated into a regulation or a rule law. And Kwame rightly pointed to that. The regulation 128 among others. And it's because of the challenges that as a country we are facing in terms of the new found taste for the use of motorcycle other than for private, which is being used everywhere in the country. And in certain instances, you take a step back and feel that, in quote, it is justified. It is the reason why we have been back and forth. And I'm not surprised that the state has taken a position to do an in-depth study of it and to probably come up with a gamut of solution basket, which will, in a way, also bring a paradigm shift in traffic policing. And basically, as stakeholders, we are all working on it because the problem is obvious, and it is every per hour, and it is a serious challenge for us. However, we are not sitting aloof, and we're doing our best with our SUS, among other, particularly in urban rural settings during rush hour and morning and evening and during the day, particularly in the CBDs and all that, regarding registration licensing and moving violations, including running amber lights, red lights, and then all others. And However, I must admit that it is very challenging as a result of, particularly in the peri-urban Accra and Kumasi and other areas. And it is where we are here, how far we've come with this. And that's why, to a very large extent, the department is in support of all stakeholders to do an in-depth study to come up with very pragmatic solution to this emerging but worrying trend of how these motorcycles are impacting on life. So we continue to do our best under the circumstances. However, I think that a gamut of solution will assist other than deploying only traffic police to look out there and arrest. We need others to support, particularly when you look at the discourse, landscape. A lot are suggesting that, for example, there should be improvement in our traffic system. There should be improvement in our commercial transport system. And then the public service vehicles, particularly commercial, should be extended to other areas to support, and dedicated lanes should be done for motorcycles when it comes to urban settings, when new roads are being constructed. Among other suggestions that I think that when it is implemented now and over time will assist. But that will not also prevent us from continuing with our effort in looking out for motorcycle-related violations and either deterring, arresting, and prosecuting at the motor courts.
And Mr. Chairman, if you take a look at the 2019 figure, we had a total, the vehicles, 18% rise, and then you look at the injuries and the subsequent fatalities, about 3.4% rise from the 2018 figure, if you get a record of 2019. You look at jurisdictions in the sub-region, Benin, Togo, Nigeria. I would say Benin and Togo, they are more regulated, especially in Benin. And even in India, until their development, and China now, it was a mainstay of transport. How can we do the marrying of the two, which is the last of the three options that now faces the ministry, and you haven't collated that, to see that we can do the integration?
Yeah, so we need to look at, I always say that in trying to develop any piece of legislation looking forward, you want to look at best practice also, but also look at your socio-cultural circumstances. Even in Ghana, if you went to the three northern regions, Tamale, the former three northern regions, Tamale, Bogawa, I tell you, motor riders are very law-abiding. They drive to the traffic light, it turns red, they stop, wait for other users to navigate, move on. The problems you may observe there is the use of crash helmets. Even that, we're beginning to see some level of improvement. If we're to look at the data very well, it will become very obvious that in other urbanized environments, in Accra, in Kumasi, Takrade, where for one reason or the other, even in these areas where there appear not to be transportation constraints, we have found a way to allow for the use of motorcycles, but somehow the riders don't obey the traffic infractions, the traffic regulations. So they get to the traffic lights and they behave as though they are not part of the traffic. And many of the instances we've recorded, even when you look at the pedestrian deaths, is as a result of these riders failing to obey these traffic regulations. When the light turns red, it turns green for a pedestrian. And when the pedestrian is using the road, there's always this conflict and collision. If you went to 37, for instance, there's been a number of cases where relatives have gone to visit their colleagues, patients. And just when they have left the hospital, at the 37 intersection, they get knocked down by motorcycles and get back to the hospital. So, in as much as we want to look at a review of the current law, to see whether we could vary to accommodate and allow for the use of these cycles commercially in very restricted jurisdictions or areas within our country if the law allows. Bottom line is that riders must also begin to appreciate that they are part of the traffic environment and there are no different rules for them. All rules that are related to drivers also apply to them. And once we begin to do so, use the necessary personal protective equipment, abide by the law, we'll be good to go. So we are here because riders are indisciplined. Otherwise, the law does not say that we should not use motorcycles. It says if you're a private rider, you can put on your protective apparel, obey the law. Why not? So if they are doing so, why not extend the same protocols to those who want to use it for commercial purposes if that is allowed? But we had looked at, again, in coming to the current position of the law, we had done a certain study, which I know you are privy to, and tried to look at the examples from within the West African sub-region. And I'll tell you, our colleagues from Nigeria and even Benin and the rest of them, prior to 2012, forewarned that given our own experiences, if you have the opportunity, do not allow the use of motorcycles for commercial purposes on the evidence of what we have seen.
But now it's gone out of hands.
Yes, because with all due respect, I think that we haven't done as much in the area of enforcing the law as far as these bicycles are concerned. I agree with my colleague Obeying that when you speak to the police, they say they have some constraints as far as dealing with these recalcitrant motor riders. However, I mean, that's why they are there. You want to believe that in spite of the constraints, we all assist to engineer a very robust means of enforcing the law against these specialized road users. And I think that's what the police is seeking to do.
Superintendent Obin, it will mean that your men, your department, has been weak when it comes to the enforcement.
Oh, I think it's the reason why we are discussing this, because over time we have been taken by events as a result of overwhelming numbers of the use of motorcycle and the fact that within the motorcycle space, the country, we haven't done much. Though the law is there, people can own motorcycle and people can even ride, and even those who recently that I think efforts are even being made to regulate them in terms of training the rider, potential rider who's 18 and want to ride, learning how to ride and be licensed and all that. And that is part of regulation. And I said earlier that you make a law to prohibit a motorcycle not to be used for commercial. But it is obvious across the country. And unless we all want to pretend that that regulation is not being complied with. And people are using motorcycle for commercial purpose.
Yeah, it's not being complied with because your department has not been enforcing it adequately.
What I'm saying is that because the system has made it so, and I'm not surprised that studies are ongoing, because all of us were using it for private, and all of us, all of a sudden, across the country, Ghanaians have found new taste for using motorcycles, I said it, for commercial, and particularly not only for dispatch, but for carrying fare-paying passengers. And it is not registered so for that, and also sometimes difficult for you to know which one is private, which one is commercial, and therefore there's lacuna. And that is why I'm happy that studies are ongoing, so that if these things are not resolved within the policy and then the regulation, it will be difficult for any policing entity to enforce motorcycle regulation, because it is now everywhere. People you are using it, either buying it or freely patronizing it as Ghanaians who know that the law is there, but go and stand and or in their home they call and they sit on it. How would you, for example, know that that motorcycle coming is the person behind it is a fair paying person? And these are challenges that comes with it. And no wonder elsewhere in other jurisdictions they have established institutions that target motorcycle riders for commercial or private, train them, license them, clothe them, give them access, and set up institutions to monitor, regulate on daily basis. And therefore, we come back to the issue of, for example, commercial transport operation services and all that. Everybody is doing whatever he likes in terms of motorcycle. And it's the same thing that's happening in the other formal sector. And therefore, we need to resolve some of these things. Otherwise, the impact will always be what we are seeing, that the traffic police will be overwhelmed, and then we turn around and be trying to find solace in the traffic police, because in the system there are already inhibitions that make it difficult for the motorcycle policy and regulations to be enforced and implemented. And therefore, let's broaden this discussion to this area, that now it is with us, it is overwhelming, it is everywhere, and people are using it for both private and commercial. Sometimes difficult to get the commercial, but there is a way to resolve it. Learning from other jurisdictions do that. Like I said, so far as we are concerned, we will do SUS. We look out for those who are not wearing helmets. We look out for those who don't have license, insurance, and among others. But sometimes, how do you, for example, enforce on those who are using for commercial? Know that immediately commercial interest comes in, the equation changes, and that's why in every road law, I attempt to make regulation to regulate commercial interest on the road. And in Ghana, motorcycle is obviously being used everywhere for commercial, but there is no regulations for them because we think that they have been prohibited. But we are also patronizing as people.
Are you then saying that because they are with us, then the policy should make considerations for that?
No consideration. We should look at it holistically. An analysis have been done, findings have been done, that we make a new policy that will allow for new ways of regulating. And I said that, for example, I will not hesitate, and I'll be very happy if the state set up a dedicated unit, for example, at the DVLA, that will only train motorcycle for commercial and how transport service that relate to motorcycle, for example, if we go moving forward, is established to allow those who are using it to be regulated, know them, clothe them, give them a new color on their motorcycle, give them routes to operate, and for us to monitor, know that these are transport operators that are operating like it elsewhere. And until then, it is, like I said, everybody is doing what, and it is difficult to monitor to know who it is sometimes difficult and where it is sometimes difficult and all that. So for me, we need to look at all, because traffic policing is not only deploying police officers to stand on the road to detect, but it's also other systems that are put in place in terms of entry and in terms of operation. And this can be done when you look at it holistically and resolve. Otherwise, with the current traffic policing methods on the use of motorcycles, we wouldn't benefit it that much looking at what is happening. And therefore we need a shift.
Mr. Chahine, you look at, we should look at the situation, behavior, acceptability, use, and then construction, engineering, and policy. So it means that somehow it's here to stay. If that is it, then we come to the last option of marrying. In what ways can we fashion out the best means by which we do regulation? He has said that we need a department or an outfit within their establishment that could give the goodwill to those who want to use it to come forward to say, look, we want to use it, we want to do the licensing, and we'll come back to renew, etc.?
Yeah, so here to stay, I think that it's an illegality.
Based on current law?
Yes, based on current law. And if we want to regularize or legalize, then the conditions must be suited for it. For instance, as DSP Superintendent Obey indicated, today, if you went to DVLA, even though they have records of driving schools that have been registered to train persons who are interested to drive in the whole of Ghana, I shudder to say that, but for one institution that was set up a couple of years ago in Wa, there is absolutely no driving school that has taken up the burden of training motor riders. So most of the people you find riding, except for a few who, by some arrangement in the past, defer to some specialized training opportunities by the police. Most of them ride on, they learn the skill on their own. And that's part of the problem. If you are learning to ride on your own, you see how risky it is to get into the road environment, especially with the type of vehicle in issue. Then it's problematic. So if we are taking a decision, for instance, that we want to allow for their use and also regulate them, these are the sort of considerations that we must reflect on. And also the training, apart from the training, in what ways can we regulate them so that you can have to deal with some institutional arrangement where you can also allow for some institutional controls. If all of that are in place, and there's a likelihood that their regulation will lead to an improvement, why not? But in doing so and in getting to that stage, we must try to reflect on the current state of the law and do the best we can to enforce the law at present, because the figures show that there's a need for us to do one thing or the other. And that's what we urge on all of us, whilst we hope that the ministry will take immediate steps to resolve the matter one way or the other. Well,
that's what we have to bring the discussion to a close. We thank you for your presence right here in the studio and also online. The Superintendent Alex Obeng, Head Education, Research and Training of the Police MTTD, thank you for joining us on the phone as well. We wish you a good morning. And then you also, Kwame Kudia Ichiahene, Head of Regulations, Inspection and Compliance at the National Road Safety Authority. I wish you a blessed day.
Thank you very much.
But the summary of the subject is that, well, within the period of the lockdown, we saw a reduction in the numbers of the crashes, but then, well, the motorcycles, they just wouldn't stop crashing. Because if we take a look at the 2019 figure, there was an increase in terms of the numbers of these motorcycles that were involved in accidents, 18.75%. Then we also have the fatalities and the injuries being an increment over 2018. For 2019, 3.4%. All right, that's where we have to take a break. And when we come back again, we'll tell you about that interaction that Kojo Yankson had with Ernesto Yeboah. You all remember he's a convener of that vigil. That is the solidarity event for the Black Lives Matter movement. That started with the death of George Floyd in the US, subsequently swept through the UK or Europe, and then we've had the respective countries in Africa also solidarizing as well. We'll bring you that interaction next. Do stay with us.